I don't think that anyone disagrees with the fact that we actually are in the middle of a cold period.
Weather experts are calling it the hottest summer in recorded history.
We've had 9 years of a global cooling trend.
It's an absolutely monstrous heat wave. The asphalt on the roads is melting.
We're definitely, in my mind, not only in a cooling period, we're going to be staying in it for a couple decades.
Communist corporations, elitist politicians, and reckless scientists have contributed to creating a phony crisis.
Scientists are fudging data to make their case for global warming.
There's no making a deal with these vampires. I mean, this is a greedy... folks, I'm not trying to demonize them.
And this is not anecdotal. This is scientific temperature research surveys. We are actually cooling.
In 1953, Popular Mechanics reported that Dr. Gilbert Plass had studied the radiant properties of atmospheric gases and predicted global warming from CO2 pollution. Dr. Plass was recruited by the U.S. military to study heat radiation in the atmosphere and help develop a new generation of heat-seeking missiles. These deadly weapons are working proof of how well we understand the behavior of greenhouse gases.
Even now, man may be unwittingly changing the world's climate through the waste products of his civilization.
In 1965, a science advisory panel told President Lyndon Johnson that man was unwittingly conducting a vast geophysical experiment with greenhouse gases.
The greenhouse effect. Everything is burning up. Okay, wise guy.
In 1979, the National Academy of Sciences wrote that a wait-and-see policy on the greenhouse effect might mean waiting until it was too late.
The scientific consensus that CO2 will build up and will be a potential problem is very large.
But I thought that the most interesting scientific event of 1988 was the way everyone started speaking about the greenhouse effect just because there was a hot summer and a drought, when I had been talking about the greenhouse effect for 20 years at least. And there were other people who talked about it before I did.
Global warming is now large enough that we can ascribe, with a high degree of confidence, a cause and effect relationship to the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is already large enough to begin to affect the probability of extreme events.
1/3 of the state of Indiana was covered with water. That has a real impact on agricultural crops.
I guess we can't say they didn't warn us. Now, in the second decade of the 21st century, we've entered an era of consequences.
Had anything unusual lately?
National Weather Service meteorologist Jeff Johnson says he's never seen anything like it.
This was in Vivian, South Dakota, and this happened during a hailstorm on Friday. 8 inches.
And these glaciers are starting to fall apart much faster than anybody, even 2 years ago, thought they were going to do there. Potentially, we can see the seas coming up somewhere between 3 and 6 feet in the 21st century.
Everywhere we look, impacts are coming faster and harder than we would have predicted just a few years ago. The U.S. Global Change Research Program, commissioned by the Bush administration, summarized the mainstream climate outlook region by region, predicting increased temperatures, more climate-fueled weather extremes.
Is this where you tell the audience about the water shortage?
Whoa there, little Sally, not all at once.
Oh, I guess you don't want to overload them with too much exposition, huh?
Now to what some are calling the Great Drought of 2011.
I've gone through several years like this, but not this long and not this dry.
I've never seen it drier or hotter. We all thought it'd rain before we got here and it didn't, so we don't know when it's going to rain.
96 and 98 was bad, but this is a lot worse. I've never been through anything like this.
While 2008 and 2009 were bad years, farmers and ranchers say 2011 tops them all.
An epic drought the experts started tracking back in February. It hasn't stopped spreading, now covers just about the entire lower third of this country. Water supplies are drying up, crops, cattle are dying, and there's no relief in sight, sadly.
And no, this is not par for the course in July.
This month, we have seen more than 900 temperatures meet or exceed all-time records. And of course, July is only half over.
July 2011 was so hot that just by plotting the location of each daily heat record, a nearly complete image of the contiguous United States is visible.
Even nighttime brings no relief.
It's not just the highs, it's going to be the overnight lows as well, which will be near 80 or in the upper 70s across much of the middle of the country, and that can be devastating for people who don't have air conditioning.
Nighttime heat records were even more numerous. Warming at night is one of the most important and telling fingerprints of climate change due to humans and their greenhouse emissions, rather than the sun or other causes.
The big problem, overnight lows will only drop back into the upper 70s to the mid-80s.
Scientists expected 2010 to be a hot year, and it was, due to the effects of global warming and a positive El Niño cycle in the eastern Pacific. As that cycle decayed into its twin cooling phase, La Niña, global temperatures declined slightly. But even in its current neutral phase, temperatures from January to June 2011 remained unusually warm. Climate deniers have continuously predicted a cooling phase and insist that high-tech satellite temperature measurements will bear them out.
In fact, if you look at the satellite data, which is the most reliable data, the best coverage of the globe.
Hi, AccuWeather.com meteorologist Joe Bastardi. What you see here is off Dr. Roy Spencer's site, the University of Alabama, Huntsville, globally average satellite-based temperatures, and this, I think, is the holy grail of objective temperatures, where you can see with the satellite, since we got into the satellite era, what temperatures look like. You notice we have been on a slow, steady trend up over here, and over the last 10 years or so, it's been more like this. But one could argue this El Niño spike is a spike there, though not as warm as what we saw here, is significant. But it's my take and my forecast that you see this here and you see this here. We're not only going to that, we're going below that. We may even get back within the next 12 to 18 months back where we were here, which would change, which would definitely tip the scale to it has not warmed over the last 10 years. If we plummet this temperature down into here, all right, after this, then that's going to be a huge deal.
It's easy enough to check climate deniers' preferred database online. And if we compare Mr. Bastardi's predictions to the actual record, we see that summer 2010 was indeed a warm El Niño peak, followed by a classic La Niña cooling. But instead of the dramatic fall-off predicted by Mr. Bastardi, we've seen, even in this El Niño neutral period, continued warming, new heat records, and waves of climate-fueled destruction. This series is about what we've learned from observing our planet and how it works, and how a small group of very self-serving, very misguided, and very well-funded people have managed to distort the science, ignore the evidence, and delay the response to a planetary emergency. I hope you'll come along as we explore what's happening, how it affects us, and how we're going to deal with it. On Climate Denial, Crock of the Week.